Welcome back to science. Today we're going to be using the Be a Scientist notebook, and we're on lesson 3, water habitats. Let's take a look at the first page. This is page 218. Water habitats. Some organisms live in water. Circle the things they need to live. Take a second to go through and think of what they need. Would they need food? Yes, we said food is one of the things that every living thing needs. So they need food. What else do some organisms or creatures, animals that live in water need to survive? Do they need air? Yes, they actually do. This is how they get oxygen and how they're able to breathe. Do they need noise? No, that's not necessary. Do they need shelter? Yes, we said shelter is important to protect them from predators, animals that might hunt them. Do they need the right temperature? Yes. Do they need sunlight? Yes. Do they need a place to raise young? Yes. That's how they grow and how they get more babies and how the ecosystem continues. And do they need people? No. Let's take a look at this page. Look at the photo of the water habitat. What do you see in this photo? So this is underwater, so we can see some fish, even different types of fish. We can see lots of coral. We can see plants that live underwater. And then what questions do you have? Well, this is a coral reef. You might have the question, what is a coral reef? Or what type of animals live here? We'll explore these questions soon. First, I want to look at some of the needs or the things that are necessary, things that are important for living things or organisms to survive. We said some of the basic needs are water, light, nutrients, air, and space to grow or shelter. So why is light important? Sunlight is important for plants because that's how they develop and make their own food. So without sunlight, plants can't make their own food and they can't grow. Light or sunlight also helps to regulate temperature. It helps to keep the temperature at a certain level. And that's important for some animals and as well as plants. Water is something that both plants and animals need to grow as well. Water is important for the cells and for the tissue, for the parts of the animals that helps them grow, as well as the plants. A space to grow is important. If plants didn't have space, they wouldn't be able to grow. Their roots would not be able to grow and they wouldn't be able to get taller and get the sunlight they need. And animals and humans also need space to grow, as well as shelter. This can also be shelter. You need a safe place to grow, a place that's far away from tornadoes or hurricanes or strong winds or too much rain. Air is important. Air is made up of many types of gases, but humans and animals really rely on oxygen. We need oxygen to breathe and to stay alive. And plants need carbon dioxide, which is also found in air. So this is how all organisms breathe and survive. Nutrients is another thing. Plants will use the soil, the nutrients that are in soil. Nutrients are like the food, the important things that they need from the soil to grow. Humans and plants have nutrients in the form of food. So when you eat fruit and vegetables, meat, bread, all that has things that you need to survive. We're moving on to page 222 of your Be a Scientist notebook. Let's take a look at some of the vocabulary words that we've actually seen before: ocean and pond. What is a pond? If you remember, a pond is a small body of water, fresh water, that means it's not salted, that does not flow, and that is surrounded by land. And what kinds of plants and animals live in ponds? We could find things like water lilies, cattails, frogs, certain types of fish, maybe some freshwater turtles. Those are some examples of animals and plants that live in ponds. Seagrass and kelp are two ocean plants. So they live in an ocean. Remember, oceans are much bigger than ponds, and they don't have to be surrounded by land on all sides, and the water is salty. So seagrass and kelp are two ocean plants that provide and for many animals living in the ocean. What are two things they provide? The kelp and ocean plants provide shelter and food for many animals. So lots of little fish and little organisms, maybe even crabs, can hide and take shelter in the seagrass and kelp. And some of them might even eat the seagrass and kelp, so that's their food. Look at this short video about ponds and oceans and learn a little more about what they have.
Ponds and oceans are both water habitats, but are very different. A pond is a small body of fresh water that does not flow. Water lilies, cattails, and primrose willows are just a few of the many types of pond plants. Many animals, such as frogs, fish, and turtles, live in ponds. They eat other animals like dragonflies, worms, and spiders that live there. A mosquito larva sends tubes to the surface that they can breathe through. Some salamanders breathe through their skin. Fish breathe through their gills. The ocean is a large body of salt water. It is home to many different types of plants and animals. Seagrass and kelp are two types of ocean plants. Beds of kelp provide food and shelter for many kinds of ocean animals. Crabs and sea stars live close to the ocean shore. Whales, dolphins, and sharks live in the deeper water. Animals like the anglerfish and squid live in the deepest part of the ocean. Ocean animals also breathe in different ways. Did you know that crabs have gills in their claws that they can use to breathe? Ocean mammals, such as whales, dolphins, and seals, have to go to the surface to get air to breathe. Pond and ocean habitats are filled with such interesting plants and animals.
Hello, second graders. Today we're moving on to lesson 4 in our Be a Scientist notebook. We're talking about hot and cold deserts. Let's turn to page 230. Deserts. 3 friends are reading a book about deserts. Which friend has the best idea about deserts? Mason says, deserts are found in warm areas. Henry says, deserts are found in cold areas. And Dominic says, deserts are found in warm areas and in cold areas. Which do you think is correct? It's very common for us to think that deserts are only found in warm areas, but we're going to learn that they can be found in warm areas and in very, very, very cold areas. We'll explain these later on, but basically, a desert doesn't just mean hot, dry places. It means any dry place. So you can have a very cold place that is dry, which means it does not get a lot of rainfall, and that will also be called a desert. Look at the photo of the mountains and snow. What kind of habitat do you think this is? And what questions do you have? We might ask, what type of animals or plants could grow here? And what type of habitat do you think it is? It's actually a cold desert. It could be an Arctic desert. It could be a tundra. It's a place that's super cold, so it has a lot of snow and a lot of glaciers or snowy ice mountains, and very little rainfall and very little water. Desert habitats. How do animals survive in very hot or very cold habitats? Let's make a prediction. Let's guess. How are animals able to live in cold deserts? A cold desert is an icy place, so it gets very little water. And the temperatures are very, very low, meaning it's too cold to survive as we are. So animals that are able to live in cold deserts have a lot of very, very thick fur. And the fur on their bodies keep them warm. Some animals even grow fur under their paws, and that keeps them warm as well. They also have a lot of fat, and when they store fat inside their bodies, it allows them to go for a long period of time without eating too much, but also the fat in their bodies keep them warm. These animals might also learn to take shelter or create shelters in caves or under rocks. Let's take a look at this table. Record your observations of animals in a hot desert. Well, we're not going to go to the desert and look at the animals, so let's go through this together. Scorpions live in very hot deserts. These are all hot desert animals. What do they do during the day? During the day, scorpions sleep. That's because the temperature and the sun is really strong, and that's how they keep safe and not too hot. And at night, when the temperatures get cooler, they come out, and that's when they look for food. Foxes do the same. During the day, the hot desert days, when the sun is strong, foxes stay inside their little caves or dens. And during the night, they come out, and that's when they hunt. Owls stay in a hole or in cacti, in cactus, in certain types of plants or trees during the day. And at night, because they're also nocturnal, they come out at night and they're active at night. That's when they hunt and prey for food, such as mice. Now observe how animals act during the summer and winter in a cold desert. Record your observations. So a lemming is a type of fox. In summer, it lives underground in a burrow. And that's how they keep safe from the cold or the hot climates. In winter, it lives in a deep burrow under the snow. Bumblebees fly around to eat and to collect nectar during summer. And in winter, that's when they're sleepy and they do less activity because it's not the right temperature for them. It's too cold for them. Caribou, which is a type of moose or a type of deer, eats grass and plants during the summer. And during the winter, when it gets too cold for them, they migrate. That means they move. They travel to different areas, such as the south, to find food. What do most of the animals in a hot desert do during the middle of the day, and why? We learned that most animals in hot deserts during the day will sleep. And that's because the sun is very, very strong and it's too hot to go outside. And what do most animals in a cold desert do in winter, and why? If it is too cold for them, they might also sleep or stay in their shelter until it gets a little warmer, and that's the best temperature for them to go out and hunt. Now let's look through or read through some of these texts and find out some more about deserts and desert animals and habitats and how they survive the plants and animals.
Extreme habitats, desert life. Extreme habitats are some of the hottest and coldest places on Earth. Animals that live there have features that help them survive when it is very hot or very cold. A desert is very dry and hot or cold. A desert is very dry land with few plants and little rain. Animals in a hot desert get most of their water from eating plants or other animals. But many desert plants have sharp spines. Camels that live in the desert have thick lips that help them eat these plants. Camels also have humps that store fat. When they go for a long time without food or water, camels use the saved fat to stay alive. Camels have features that help them live in deserts. Desert animals and plants. Desert animals solve problems of too much heat and too little water in different ways. Jackrabbits have very tall ears that let out heat. Geckos store water and fat in their tails so they can still survive when they cannot find water and food. Desert foxes are active mostly at night when it is not as hot. These foxes dig their homes into sand to stay cooler underground. Jackrabbits have tall ears. A gecko stores water in its tail. Desert plants have special features too. A saguaro cactus taps into water deep in the ground. When it rains, the cactus stores the water like a sponge to use later. Desert foxes are active mostly at night. A saguaro cactus stores water. Arctic land. The Arctic is an extremely cold desert in the northern part of Earth. It is cold most of the year. It gets snow but little rain. Even in summer, plants do not grow tall. The Arctic has extreme cold. Arctic plants are small. Animals there, like Arctic foxes and polar bears, usually have long, thick fur to keep warm. Both of these animals have fur even on the bottoms of their paws. Their short ears help keep heat in. Arctic foxes, polar bears, and seals also have a thick coat of fat to protect them from extreme cold. Arctic foxes, polar bears, and seals have thick fur. Arctic Ocean. The Arctic Ocean has very cold water. It is partly covered with ice, yet it is home to many fish. The fish have a special matter in their blood that prevents them from freezing. Underwater plants, such as Arctic seaweed and moss, also grow there, even though it is dark most of the year. These plants grow very slowly. When they are not growing, they store nutrition until spring. When there is finally more sunlight, their tiny leaves sprout quickly before the long winter sets in again. The Arctic Ocean is covered with ice. Arctic fish and plants can live in freezing water. Animals on land and in the sea. In extreme habitats, animals and plants need certain features and habits to survive. Some animals have special abilities for that habitat too. There are Arctic animals that are skilled both on ice and in water. Penguins, polar bears, and walruses can travel on land and sea ice. They also dive for their food. They are all strong swimmers. They have to be good swimmers because they mainly eat fish. Penguins walk on ice without slipping. Polar bears can swim for hours. Walruses are fast swimmers.
Now that we've watched the video, we could be able to answer some of these questions. Let's look at the words that we have today: desert and Arctic. Remember, we said deserts can be cold or very hot. So circle the statement if true and put an X over the statement if it is false. The Arctic is a very cold desert in the northern part of Earth. That is true. Plants in cold deserts grow very quickly. That's false. We said plants in very cold deserts will grow very slowly. A desert is a very dry land that does not have many plants. That is true. It's a very dry land. Whether it's very dry and hot or very dry and cold, it just has to be dry and get very little rain. And that's why it doesn't get many plants, because there's not much water for the plants to grow. What is one way Arctic animals like polar bears or polar foxes stay warm? They have fur that keep them warm, very thick fur, and they have a lot of fat that they store their energy in, and that keeps them protected from the very cold weather. Let's look at this question. What will happen to a cactus? So we said a cactus is a very thick desert plant, hot desert plant, and a lily, which is a very thin plant that floats on the surface of ponds, in a desert habitat where there is very little water. So what will happen to the cactus and the lily if they're in a desert, dry habitat where there is little water? So lilies actually need a lot of water. So if they were in a dry desert habitat, they would die because they wouldn't have enough water to keep them alive. Cactus, on the other hand, don't need a lot of water. They can store all the water they need for many, many months inside them. So they don't need water, so they can survive in the desert habitat. Here are some investigations or some experiments that you can try. Draw or write about what you observed. Plants before the investigation and plants after the investigation. What would you do? You could get a cactus and a lily and put them in very dry places, very hot places, and very cold places, and see what happens to them before you start and after they've been in the hot place for a long time. And then we'll ask, what did the cactus look like at the end of your investigation? At the end of this, the cactus should look fine. If you put the cactus in a hot place, it should be able to survive. And how did the lily look at the end of the investigation? The lily might dry out, and it might turn from green to yellow, and it would die if you put it in a very hot place. So let's take a look at this again. How was the cactus able to survive without water? This is an answer you should know now. The video that we watched also helps us answer these questions. A polar bear is able to stay warm in the Arctic because of its fur, right? We said it had very thick fur. Animals that live in deserts can get water by, well, if they can't store water inside them, they can get water from the plants, such as cactus. We said camels have very thick lips, so even though cactus have spines and they're prickly and sharp, camels can eat them. And there's so much water in cactus because cactus store a lot of water. So that's how animals in the desert get their water, by eating plants.